number one, my first read, my Kansas Jayhawks against Texas and the Longhorns and Steve Sarkisian. Look, Texas has done the thing you want to see them do since pulling the upset since Alabama. I don't know if the level, like Baylor's a weird team going on the road. It's a weird rivalry, big time win. Wyoming can slow the game down. So the 2 wins, I think you've done everything you need to do in those situations. They dominated Kansas last year on the road in Lawrence. We all know what happened 2 years ago when Kansas was in Texas, but that was the beginning of the Sarkisian era. This is a different Texas team. I think Kansas is as good as, if not better. I don't like the 16.5. I think I like Kansas plus the points. I think this is a shootout. I don't know if Kansas has enough horses to. I don't know if they've got enough cows,
enough
steeds.
Devos.
They don't have enough. They don't have enough red meat to stay with the Longhorns in the fourth quarter. But I do think they can make this a really interesting game. They ran the football in really interesting ways last week against BYU. They're just so much fun to watch. I had this one circled as a loss, so I have no problem staying with my Jayhawks despite maybe a loss this weekend to Texas. But this is utterly fascinating and would not be surprised if Kansas makes it a game.
I think if you're making the case for Kansas to make this a game, it kind of comes down to timing because of the Oklahoma game next week. And if you look past Kansas, this Kansas team can score. Jalon Daniels is the type of quarterback that could just have the one-off massive performance in Austin that helps the Jayhawks pull off the upset. And you go back to last year's game, though, where it's probably going to be won or lost for Kansas is in the trenches. They gave up 427 rushing yards to Texas last year in that game. So I think the question for me is, how does Kansas hold up defensively? Giving up 24 points to Nevada, 23 to Illinois. Still some question marks about this defense. They did score 2 touchdowns last week against BYU. So, I think this group is a little bit better, but really it all comes down to the offense probably and how well they can move the ball against a good Texas defense and how to your point, avoiding the missteps in conference play for Texas is important if they want to make the playoff. They went on the road and pounded Baylor last week. This would be another sign that this is a different Texas team if they just show up, take care of business a week before Oklahoma.
And it's all about the line of scrimmage. If Texas wants to be taken seriously, the team that beat Alabama and can play in the playoff, you got to show that the line of scrimmage is what it is. And so far, we've seen that. That could be a reason why they run Kansas out of the building. If that's the direction this game goes, I have a feeling it's because of the line of scrimmage. I will say, Mr. Robinson, not in the backfield anymore for Texas. He's about half of those 400 yards are in Atlanta right now doing work. So we got to point that out. Not that Texas is hurting for talent, but and then quick side note here, but Kansas and BYU, 2 undefeated teams in a conference game in the Big 12, just odd. That was hard to get used to, and I guess you're going to have to get used to that. Watching Oklahoma at Cincinnati, very odd, very weird in a bit with the Big 12 logos. I don't have to get used to that because that's the only time that's going to happen.
Right.
So I'm taking Texas. I'm sort of wishful thinking that Kansas can give them a game, but what I hope is that Jalon Daniels, sort of like Oregon used the stage last week to sort of catapult itself. Like Colorado presented the stage and Oregon catapulted itself into sort of like more national consciousness. Bo Nix, national consciousness, and Dan Lanning, way more high profile now as a head coach. I think I want to see Jalon Daniels get some national run out of this game. Like he goes in there and plays really well. They come up short. They lose by 10. We could still be having a conversation about how Jalon Daniels is still underrated, which I think he is. I still think he's one of the most underrated players in the country.
I think he's the best quarterback in the Big 12 potentially. I mean, obviously he missed, he was hurt with a back injury, got off to a slow start with that injury. But yeah, I think he's probably one of the more underappreciated players. Throw Devin Neal in there as well at running back. I like Texas too. I think, like I said, the argument for Kansas to cover would be the timing of this game, but I think the matchups just favor Texas.